It's this incredibly simple and incredibly difficult and enigmatic position. In a basic sense, you start everybody with the music and you direct them certain tempo and it ends. And then there's a whole universe sort of in between that which we're responsible for. From a philosophical point of view, I think the role of the conductor is to get the best performance out of anybody who is in front of them. So whether that is a singer, whether that is the clarinet player, whether that's the chorus, whether that's working with a great director, what can I do to enable the people in front of me, all the forces that make art, to do their best? And the complication with that is that how I speak to a member of the orchestra is going to be different than how I speak to a singer, which is how I collaborate with a chorus. So you have to always be sort of adjusting how you're saying things or your approach to getting a certain response. We live in a world that communication can be such a problem, right? My job as a conductor is to communicate a lot of information, but with no words. So everything I do it happens with a gesture. So with a singer, if I want them to breathe a certain way, if I make a gesture and I give them room to breathe, the sound will be different. If I need a precise beat, that changes. If I'm anxious and I try to go like this to the strings clutch and the winds don't breathe, so I have to always be aware of my energy and to make sure that the way I'm physicalizing sound creates the sound from the forces in front of me to the audience. What's beautiful about it is that you'll see in John Adams, he's once again a combination of incredibly intense rhythmical components. He has, you have 3 different rhythms going on in the orchestra, and it sounds bombastic and crazy. And then we'll get to a section where he just has a drone in the bass. And then the singer comes on top of that. And what's interesting to me is he's able to create this atmosphere because he has a juxtaposition of incredibly rhythmical, complex music, and then it's all removed to a drone and a singer. And because of that, the audience has to be drawn into that. That's one of the great things about John Adams, is his ability to we live in this world of both complexity and simplicity, and his ability to create an atmosphere is unparalleled. In that, as an American, we grew up with film. I live in Los Angeles. Hollywood, film, music, it's part of our DNA. And I think that John Adams is somebody who, it was a part of him as well. And he knows how to create this atmosphere that a lot of the film composers in Hollywood did, generations before. It's a funny story. I met John when I was a pianist at Cincinnati Opera. I was an assistant at Cincinnati Opera in the United States. And I was playing one of his beautiful works, Flowering Tree. So in an opera rehearsal, the orchestra isn't there from the beginning. So we get to the first day, we have a music rehearsal, but instead of an orchestra, there's a conductor, and then I'm sitting at a piano, and I'm playing a reduction of the orchestra part. And then we go into staging rehearsals where that's where the director works with the singers, go here, and this is the character, this is what we want to bring out of, this is aesthetically what we want to see on stage, so on and so forth. And I just sit there every day and play the score. Now, I talked about how rhythmically complex his music is, and he creates atmosphere using many different instruments, doing many different things at the same time. Well, the piano vocal score, which is what it's called, has all that information. And it's very difficult, and it took me months to learn. And every rehearsal, I would sweat bullets just trying to figure out, how do I play this? How can I sort of recreate the sound of the orchestra? And by the end of the process, I was completely drained, and I met John Adams at an after party, and very, very nice, serious man, very nice. He said, you know, I introduced myself, and he said, what did you do with the production? And I said, I was the rehearsal pianist. And he said, oh dear, my apologies to you. So he realized the complexity of how difficult it was. And so I appreciated that he was aware of the complexity of the rehearsal process and how difficult his music can be to play, although it's worth it, of course. He always displaces the beat. So if you hear a pits in the bass, you think that's beat 1. But really that's a rest, and it's a 16th note off of a rest. So you're constantly conducting, and what you feel is the beat is not. So what he does is it's older music. Da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dee-dum, ba-ga-dum, ba-ga-dum, ba-ga-dee-dum, tick-a-dum, tick-a-dum, tick-a-dee. You know exactly where the beat is, you know where the phrase is going. But here we give a downbeat, and then we live in this world for minutes. And to be able to shape and phrase and make music, but still just keep that clock going, can offer complexity. For singers, you'll see tonight, they tell a story. John Adams writes what seems to be political pieces, but I never found him to be political. I think he's more interested in characters during intense political situations. So I think during these intense moments in history, really unique perspectives come from the characters. And I think he's more interested in telling the stories of these characters, of the physicist in Dr. Atomic, rather than making a statement about nuclear arms in this country. Operas are being written by Mason Bates, Steve Jobs, but we know this person, we've seen movies, but we get to see a different side of him through the writing of Steve Jobs by Mason Bates, because we get a different perspective than if we had a musical that might not be maybe serious enough to deal with the complexity of a man that we all think we know, but we want to know more. His electronic music is it's groundbreaking. And you sit in that audience and you're hearing something that you haven't really heard before. So I'm really interested in sort of the people who did it first, who, Duchamp at putting a toilet in a gallery. Well, is that interesting? Well, yeah, it is, because no one did it previously, and he was making a statement. And then people copy, and then they start to kind of take that one idea and they start to do different things with. Well, Mason is doing this with music. And the fact that in Santa Fe, the world premiere, you would go there and sit, and then you would hear clicks and slides and waves, sound waves, and all these. You're sitting there like, what is this world I'm entering in? But more importantly, it's the complexity and the execution of it that helps to tell his story better. And in this particular situation, telling the story of Steve Jobs, you couldn't find a better way to do it than with electronic music on top of great orchestral writing. One of the aspects that make this piece so wonderful is all the rhythmical complexity, and he'll write in 7/4/2/2 at the same time. So you have different rhythms sort of stacked on top of each other, and just from a technical standpoint, getting everybody to do that can be challenging. He was affected by Buddhist philosophy, and everything he did, he was trying to get to the most simplistic yet perfect solution for everything. And there's no better way to describe sort of our condition as a circle. So It's a beautiful visual component, as well as the philosophy which caused, a revolution that we all, right next to, we have, an iPhone, iPad. There's not one person that hasn't been affected by what Steve Jobs has done. There's been countless documentaries about Steve Jobs, and each one is simply, it has a different perspective. And so the opera and the libretto isn't, I wouldn't say rosy. I think I don't think it's overly. It doesn't seem untruthful to me. It seems like a side that was absolutely there. And in his later interviews or college speeches, you could tell. I mean, there was somebody who had been through a lot in his life, had achieved many things, and his priorities, I'm sure, shifted many times, which is partially why he was able to evolve in the way he did. And because of that, he learned a lot in his life, and I'm happy that the libretto paints somebody who was complicated, but also there were many beautiful aspects of the life of Steve Jobs. I love the fact that you would never, at the end of the opera, Steve Jobs' wife says, "Look up." And it was neat for me that you end an opera about the life of Steve Jobs that essentially says, "Put your phone away and look at the sky," American opera right now, we're sort of going through, I wouldn't say a renaissance, we're walking into a new time. We have the situation that new creation is about the most important thing in the music business. Previously, you would think, okay, La Boheme sells out the Met, Carmen sells out the Met. These sort of traditional core repertoire pieces. But what's interesting is Philip Glass' Akhenaten was just performed at the Metropolitan Opera, and sold out shows, and they're bringing it back in 2 years. That's fascinating to me. This is a shift. This is a shift in the landscape. And right now, there's no country that is producing more new commissions. And what opera companies in the States, they're realizing, if they're going through economic hardships, previously you would become sort of artistically conservative. So if you're having a budget issue, you know what? We're not going to do that piece that people don't really know about. We're going to do repertoire that gets people there. Butterfly, wonderful pieces, Tosca. However, artistically, that is a bit limiting as well. So what's great about where we are with American music, American opera, that people want to see this. People are excited to see new works. People want to talk and meet the composers. In some ways, it makes the art form more accessible. We're not just watching an opera written by a man in the mid-1800s. We're talking and listening to music written by females and males that you can talk to at an after party. For me, the whole what's exciting is the creation process. I speak to the librettist. I tweak things with the composers during the rehearsal process. It's a real creative thing. We're creating something. When we walk into a rehearsal for a world premiere, we sort of don't know what we're going to have at the end. So every day sort of feels like a new creation process. People talk about how opera is dead or classical music is dead. And I always say that I disagree vehemently. The institutions will always evolve. They'll always change. But art itself in the United States, especially with opera, we're at a new frontier. What's beautiful about opera is that when characters are established throughout the entire piece. And all of a sudden they come together and you have 4 different characters and oral aesthetics stacked on top of each other. That can only be done in opera. That can't be done in film. And I think it's one of the reasons that live performance of opera is so relevant. It's the only art form where you can experience 4 different characters, 4 different oral aesthetics stacked on top of each other in one measure of music. American opera is sort of a culmination of so many things. With every composer, they have an aesthetic. There is something artistically that makes them tick. Now, generally, if you go a little bit deeper, what made them tick is because, you know what, they love the late Beethoven string quartets. They love fugal writing of Bach. They like the minimalism music of whomever, Steve Reich or Philip Glass or whatever the case is. So when people are writing new works right now, you know, American composition is sort of a culmination of a Western tradition that is the culmination of a couple hundred years. Of course, you have people like Copland, right? You think of like that American sound, like the open fifths, the C and the G, and that we think of, oh, we're on the prairie, or you know. So you can't be an American and not be affected by those things. But if you look at somebody like Copland, even the more simplistic writing of Copland, that's only one aspect of him as an artist. He wrote some incredibly complex atonal music as well. So what's beautiful is, you know, they say that, you know, America, or at a time, was the sort of melting pot. Everybody was coming, bringing stories, bringing traditions, bringing ideas about their life, and they all kind of came together and they formed this whole other thing. Well, American opera for me and American composition is the perfect example of that. So I think many times art is a reflection of the time. Okay. And I think that we live in a world that we're so consumed with immediate gratification. We're used to the 26-minute Netflix, and we want to tell the stories of our time. And sometimes a musical might not get to the core of the issues of our time. I think great art happens when, you know, the artists ask themselves questions that other people aren't asking, and they're trying to find solution to things you didn't even know was a problem. And then you get one idea that can completely change your path artistically, because you discover one thing. And I think that's a beautiful thing as an artist, just to be able to think about problems that other people don't see as problems, and come up with solutions to the problems that you see differently than other people. So inevitably, both Sasha and Ed come back to it. They're a little more comfortable because they've done it before. They're not panicked like, oh, do I know it? You know, they know it, they've done it. And so I just think naturally they bring certain things. You know, this music, once again, I keep talking about telling stories. I kept telling stories. The text is everything. And so one thing I worked with Sasha and Ed, you know, stop singing rhythms. Like just speak to me. Don't sing 4/16 notes. Just say the word and connect with the text and say those words to the people. And I think because they're maybe a little more familiar, and I brought that to light, it'll be a slightly different performance than you might have heard in Santa Fe. Okay. In this particular case, doing John Adams with a Chinese orchestra was quite fascinating to me, because this is music they might not be familiar. So the first rehearsal, there you could tell there was just a lack of understanding. If they saw a mezzo piano, they would come in, play. And during the final dress rehearsal last night, just living with this aural world, they started to play the notes slightly different. And they realized that instead of just play, they just sneak in a little bit. So it created that sort of atmosphere. So I believe every time we play this music, it's getting better and closer to the world of John Adams. Everything that I have ever done artistically in my life that was different and new, it was always criticized. There's no way to do something new and for there not to be pushback. And that pushback needs to happen. Also, when the core canon of repertoire we listen to, Butterfly, for example, by Puccini, that went through countless revisions. Countless revisions. And so now we have sort of what we consider like the version. So these pieces after the premiere, they're not like signed, sealed, put under the shelf, and that's what they are. These pieces will always evolve. And even it'll be done in San Francisco, and there are edits and changes, so on and so forth. So for some reason, the press sort of reviews opening nights as if it is the finished product, but it's just the beginning. It's really the beginning of the process. I conducted the world premiere of a piece by great American composer Ricky Ian Gordon, Morning Star. And it's a beautiful story about Jewish immigrants. The story is based around the triangle fire on the Lower East Side. Wonderful story, wonderful music, and that piece will continue to evolve. And as it's performed, the composer tweaks, and so that's what's so beautiful about our art form. It's never, and especially right now in American music, it's never just completed. It's always going through revisions. In some ways, the creation of a new work, there's no lines to draw in. We create it. We're not thinking, well, 5 years ago this was recorded, and or is the production we're doing better than the one that Salzburg did, or when I conduct standard repertoire, you can't do certain pieces without having that monkey on your back of how it was done however many years ago. I conducted Tosca, and the tenor was Di Stefano. And that Cavaradossi, that tenor, Di Stefano, is just so in my mind. And so in some ways that's wonderful. I know the way he does it, I know the tradition, but we still need to think of these roles new every day. So with a new piece, we don't have the same monkey on our back, but we have also the complexity of making something happen that we don't really know what it is yet. That's both a beautiful and challenging act. What's interesting is when you work on a piece, you get it to a certain level, especially with a premiere. Unfortunately, premieres never have quite the amount of rehearsal time that's needed. So you get to a point where that's what it's going to be for the premiere, and you have 8 performances, and then you put it away. And then a couple months go by, you do a more standard opera, then you do a modern opera, and then you come back to it. And you're a little different because of your travels, because of the artists you've worked with, so on and so forth. It's a brilliant from a marketing point of view, it's wonderful, you know, to have that R separated from evolution. It's both, Steve Jobs created a revolution in this, in his world. He came to this planet and completely changed it. And so I think it's wonderful because he revolutionized the entire world, and the stories about his evolution in the world which he revolutionized. So you can't come up with a better title for an opera. And I've been reading a lot about architecture recently. I think there are many similarities. I think that architects deal with defining space, and they define space by, you know, a building that goes like this or goes like this. And so let's say it's a box, you're defining space. And then inside that box, you can slice that up. And as a conductor, we do the same thing. As opposed to it being a physical space, we have a score. And the score is, you know, let's say 30 minutes of music from here to here. And then that's my structure. And that composition is broken into different scenes, different sections. This is faster, this is slower, this builds up to this moment. And my job as the conductor is to figure out how to navigate that space, which I think is very similar to how an architect defines space in a physical structure. Most of my performances are on the stage, the Coliseum in the UK, or, you know, Carnegie Hall, or wherever the case is. And, you know, occasionally we come across people through our travels who have been successful in business and have revolutionized their world. And because of it, they have the means to support the arts. And many times they do not. But I feel lucky to have met Adam, who in his own way I see as an artist, the way he sees the world, the way he talks about the world, the sort of joy he has about life. He very much is an artist. And it's beautiful that he has helped to bring together and create a program of not your standard Christmas or American music to give to the public or to his friends. He created a beautiful artistic program that will change them in some way, because they're going to experience something that without Adam's guidance they wouldn't have possibly experienced. So I thank you, Adam, very much for all you have done, and I feel honored to have met you.